So I've finally gotten my hands on the Yamaha MT-09, and after a couple of days riding it, I can safely say that I can give you guys my own personal opinion. Now, I have owned an MT-07 in the past, I do own an MT-10, and this is just the missing puzzle piece, which will be perfect for an upcoming comprehensive review of all the bikes combined. But for now, this is just gonna be an MT-09 honest review. Since the year of 2017, Yamaha has decided to update the looks of the MT-09 in Europe, as well as the looks of the FZ-09 in North America, in which the FZ-09 next year became the MT-09 in North America. Meanwhile, the MT-09 in Europe stayed as formerly known the Yamaha MT-09. Anyways, the headlight assembly got a huge overhaul, having two headlights and supporting low beam and high beam on either side, which has definitely improved the looks of this motorcycle. Your opinion may vary. Although Yamaha may have improved the looks, the functionality was not, with many people complaining that the visibility should be drastically improved on these new headlights. Now, going to the opposite end, the taillight was also redesigned and does not feel like an afterthought anymore, cries in MT-10. It does seem like this taillight does a much better job of following the natural lines of the bike, which is really nice to see, and this bike is fitted with an aftermarket piece, but my opinion stays the same for the OEM part. The overall looks of this motorcycle is definitely in the top among Japanese made naked bikes from other manufacturers, and this bike does look very aggressive from multiple angles, especially when you're looking at it from the side. The angular gas tank definitely helps out with the look, having very unique shape, being narrow at the bottom, becoming wider as you get closer to the top. And the overall construction just seems well thought out, especially when looking at this beautifully crafted frame and this great looking swooping swing arm, which doesn't look like a stick. Looking at you, Suzuki. But where's this bike's ideal environment when it comes to actually riding it? Now, this bike doesn't have any fairings. It's not made for aerodynamics whatsoever. When it comes to aerodynamics, this bike is pretty much a brick, but after playing around with the clutch, the engine power, the throttle response, I can safely say that this is one of the best, if not the best bike for in-town use. Starting off with the clutch is super light due to that slipper clutch, and just being in stop and go traffic is such a breeze. I can be in stop and go traffic on hours upon hours upon hours and not be tired whatsoever due to this clutch. Also, this bike is really good at handling really low speeds and high gears. For example, if I'm going in 5th gear 50 kilometers an hour, this bike will have no problem powering its way through because the engine is pretty torquey. Compared to other more powerful bikes in this type of gearing, the bike will start chugging. But this is really good, especially in city use if you don't want to be in really high RPMs and you just want to cruise. And if you guys are wondering how I'm able to mount my GoPro just like this one right over here, check out Tech Moto. We sell custom action camera mounts for a variety of motorcycle helmets available on our website. Links in the description below. And this bike is also perfect for going from a dead-end stop. It almost requires no clutch action whatsoever. All you have to do is just give a little bit of throttle, just release the clutch a little bit, and this bike starts going without any problems. Compared to larger CC bikes where you do have to play with the clutch a little bit more so you can make the engine rev up a little bit higher so you can get a smoother start. With this bike being perfect for in-town use, the MT-09 does include a gear indicator, which does help you out if you're constantly changing gears and putting your bike into neutral. Speaking of putting your bike into neutral, not exactly sure why Yamaha decided to have a quick shifter light in the first place instead of just putting a label on the LCD display, but the light is super bright and exactly the same color as the neutral light. Now granted, I have never confused the QS light with the bike being in neutral, but it is something that kinda annoys me.
The bike also has a gas gauge, which shouldn't be a surprise to any of you as all modern bikes have that feature. Isn't that right, R1? But I did find that the bars stay at full for a very long time, and suddenly out of nowhere they start dropping every 10 minutes, which can get annoying at times, as there were instances where I thought I had a full tank and after 30 to 40 kilometers the dash was already blinking. Lastly, the bike also shows other vital information such as multiple trips, engine temperature, and air temperature, but how does the bike feel after sitting in the saddle for a long time?
Now, the seat on this bike is actually quite a bit better than I thought it would be. It's still really narrow up into the front and it is pretty slanted down, which did make me slide down into the gas tank multiple times on my first day of riding this bike. Now, after I have gotten acquainted with this bike, I did learn to flex my arms a little bit, so upon any heavy engine braking or upon any front heavy braking, I was able to hold myself in place so I don't slide down. Now, I didn't have any problems with the seat being not comfortable. It's actually not that bad and it is pretty comfortable, but it does give you a feeling of not being secured on this bike, and I do kind of feel like I'm sitting on top of this bike instead of being one with the bike. So I would definitely suggest maybe getting a flatter seat which will help you sit in one spot a little bit more, and also a seat that will hold you in a little bit better when you're cornering from left to right, so it feels a little bit more secure and I feel a little bit more confident being on this bike.
In 2017, Yamaha gave the MT-09 adjustable suspension in the front that lets you play around with the compression and rebound. For my own weight at 160 pounds, I found the front fairly adequate and stable in light twisty roads, which gave me zero problems. The rear shock, on the other hand, even in the stiffest setting, did feel like it was throwing me around quite a bit, especially on heavy front braking and uneven road surfaces. Now, I am not a professional rider in any way, and this is just my own personal experience with this suspension setup on this particular motorcycle. As for everyday riding, I found the suspension quite nice and soft when just riding to work or just going about my day, which was a big plus. That said, I still found a few small issues with this motorcycle on a day-to-day use.
Now, I did previously state that this is one of the best bikes you can get for in-town use, but there are still a couple of problems that I have with this bike. One of the problems is the first gear. This bike has gotten a flash, it has been tuned, and the throttle response did become quite a bit better, but still in first gear, especially on low speeds, I definitely feel this bike throwing me backwards, and it did surprise me a couple of times, especially when you're making a left turn or a right turn at really low speeds and you go on and off the throttle. This bike can really throw you backwards. So what I found myself doing is going into the second gear as fast as I could so the bike becomes a little bit smoother, because anything above second gear and up, this bike is just so much smoother than it is in first gear. This bike doesn't come with an OEM quickshifter, but it is an option from Yamaha. I was quite a bit disappointed when I tried using it, because it seems that the quickshifter kills the bike for a little bit too long on higher accelerations, which throws my body forward on every upshift on high speeds. That's definitely not the case with other bikes that I've tried, so I would really love Yamaha to improve this on their upcoming Yamaha models for this MT-09.
Now, this would not be an honest review if I didn't talk about more negatives. The turn signal switches are not tactile and don't give you a good feedback when you have activated them, making me look down at the dash frequently to double check that everything is running properly. The horn button is placed in a really awkward spot and is really far away, especially when paired with Yamaha heated grips, which make it even harder to reach the horn button. Otherwise, everything on these handlebars is actually pretty well thought out.
Now these wide handlebars aren't there just for looks, but they actually serve a great purpose. Due to them being so wide, they give you so much leverage. So all it requires is just a small input and this bike just gets thrown over without any problems. Now pair that with a really light weight that this motorcycle offers and the Michelin tires that were recently put onto this motorcycle. And honestly, this is one of the best naked bikes I think I have ever ridden that can corner so well because it's so easy to turn left and right.
The Yamaha MT-09 is a really popular bike, and there are some pros and cons to that in my personal opinion. Now, since there's a huge number of these bikes being produced every year, there's a bigger demand for aftermarket parts. Since more people are purchasing this motorcycle, aftermarket companies lean towards bikes that will make them the most cash, and the MT-09 is definitely their biggest priority, which is great for MT-09 owners because they get a huge selection of aftermarket parts that they can install on their bikes. A con to all of this is that it seems everyone and their brother own the MT-09, and every time I go out I see at least one MT-09 on the streets, which makes it less special and exciting to look at. Now, one of the reasons why this bike is so common these days is because the price is fairly low for the amount of power you get out of this motorcycle, but with all of that comes a couple of drawbacks, of course.
Now, when I first started using this bike, I pressed on the front brakes and I thought, wow, these are really nice and sensitive brakes. But after a while, I've noticed that although this bike does have initial front end bite, it kind of loses it the farther you are braking forward. So if I press on the brakes, I was like, I feel the bike stopping, but then if I want to stop farther, I have to press farther and farther and farther, and I have to press really far down to get to a full stop, which is really like counterintuitive. On other bikes that I've tried out, it's kind of opposite. Although they might not have front end bite, the farther and farther you press, you actually feel more and more braking power. And this bike for some reason does not have that. So I would strongly suggest maybe upgrading the brake pads for this motorcycle and seeing if that will solve your problem before upgrading it to steel braided lines or any other braking performance upgrades, so you don't lose a lot of money. Now, going back to the rear brake, it honestly feels about the same, and it does feel like you're pressing on mashed potatoes 100% of the time. I can't really tell if I'm applying a lot of brake pressure right now or very little, and now I'm activating ABS and it doesn't give you any proper feedback, and the lever has a very long throw from up to the bottom, which I don't really like. Finally, let's talk about the engine power. This bike, I would have to disagree with a lot of other reviewers. In my opinion, all the way on the bottom of the rev range, this bike doesn't really have a lot of power, as you can tell right there. But as soon as you get past that initial first couple thousand RPMs, this bike really starts, there it is, this bike really starts to pull. And then it does fall off quite a bit, anything in the upper RPM range, such as the highway speeds and any fast riding that you would do. Saying that it does fall off does not mean that this bike is slow by any means. It still produces more than 100 horsepower to the wheels, or should I say to the rear wheel, and it will throw up a really big fight to any 600cc motorcycle. And I've seen a lot of comparisons on YouTube, and this bike did win a race against other 600cc motorcycles such as the Honda CBR 600. So me saying that the power falls off up at the top doesn't really mean that this bike is slow up on the top. I'm just trying to explain what I feel at the upper RPM range. But as I said before, for in-town use, this bike is just Perfect!
The big question that most of you are probably asking right about now is this bike worth purchasing? In my opinion, definitely. This bike will have more power than you'll ever need, it's faster than pretty much any car on the road, it's perfect for the city use, and the seat is comfortable enough for longer rides. There are also a lot of options when it comes to customizability, and in stock form this bike has good looks. These bikes were out on the market for quite some time now, and you can easily get one used for a really good price depending on where you live. I was definitely surprised by the way this thing handles and would recommend this bike to anyone who's looking for a powerful naked bike. Thank you so much for watching this video. Check out Ride Tech Moto if you're looking to purchase a custom GoPro mount. Many other videos are coming out soon, and we will see you in the next one.